All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Michelle Kirsch, and today I'll be sharing what I've learned about self-trust and how to develop trust in yourself. I feel like trust has been coming up a lot with my clients and with myself too. And a lot of us are working on making changes in our lives and finding alignment and working on boundaries and working on being more authentic and listening to our intuition more, all of that stuff. And when we start to make changes, that's when we usually start doubting ourselves. And I think that learning to trust yourself is something that's so important if you want to live more in alignment. And of course, it's not always easy. It's a practice and an ongoing practice at that. But today I want to hopefully give you some ideas for how you can start trusting yourself more. So with all of that said, I'm just going to jump into the webinar today. And like I mentioned, this webinar is called How to Develop Self-Trust. And it's the second webinar in the Into Alignment in 2018 webinar series. So here's what we're going to cover today. Why it's important to trust yourself, why you maybe don't trust yourself right now, 5 different steps that you can take to foster self-trust. I'm also going to talk about what to do when you mess up, because that's bound to happen, and a few other things too. So feel free to grab a notebook and pen, because it will be an interactive webinar. So if you need to, feel free to go grab that right now, so that you can follow along and answer questions as we go through everything. So before we dive in, I just want to briefly share a little bit about me in case you're new to my community. That's a picture of me on the screen. And like I said, my name is Michelle Kirsch. I'm a certified transformational coach and a soul realignment practitioner. That means that I do Akashic record readings. So I help my clients create a life that feels good from the inside out through aligning with their purpose. And my mission is really to help you find the clarity and confidence to live in alignment with your purpose so that you can experience more joy and fulfillment. So let's talk about why trust is important. So first of all, this is something we don't talk about that often. For example, even when I think about my bio on the last slide, I talk about how I help clients to find clarity and confidence to live in alignment, so that you can experience more joy and fulfillment. But where does self-trust fall into that, right? Because often we work on these other pieces, mainly the clarity piece. That's what I work with most with my clients. And we spend a lot of time figuring out what we want and defining what's working and what's not working and creating action plans and deciding, which habits we're going to put into place or which ones we're going to kick to the curb. And all of that is awesome and important. And I love doing that kind of work with clients and on my own, of course. But something funny happens. So you find clarity, you do all that work, and then you start to implement your plan. You start maybe taking some of the action steps that you've decided on. Or sometimes you don't even get to the action steps because just thinking about the steps allows that doubt to start creeping in. And you might end up just staying stuck because you can't make the decisions that you need to, or you continue to feel confused, or you just can't choose that first step. So all this momentum and excitement that you had around change starts to fall away. And you end up spiraling into this circle of doubting yourself and questioning everything again And maybe even thinking that maybe you didn't find clarity after all, or you didn't do it properly. So I'm curious whether you've ever experienced that. And I put a little picture up on the screen here to help illustrate this cycle that we tend to do. So let me know if you can relate to this. So what's really going on here? And I'm going to explain this cycle a little bit more. Because some people are able to take that plan when they found clarity and created a plan, they're able to take that plan and hit the ground running and not look back. While the rest of us start implementing, and suddenly we start to feel shaky and unsure. Some of us even just come to a complete stop. And I believe that that has a lot to do with self-trust. So when we make an attempt to change or do something new, our ego freaks out because the results of what we're trying to do are obviously unknown. We don't know what's going to happen when we create this change or do this new thing. And our mind does not like that. So we start asking all these questions like, can I trust myself that I've made the right decision? Can I trust myself that I'll actually move forward and do what I said I was going to do? Especially if in the past maybe you haven't. Can I trust myself that I won't give up when it's hard? Can I trust myself that I'll stay true to what I decided was, my values or my goals or my dreams? And if you don't trust yourself, you let those doubtful thoughts not only creep in, but take over. And so that's where we follow those arrows around in the cycle instead of out into forward action. So you stop taking action, or you self-sabotage, or you don't do what you told yourself you were going to do. So you start at that desire point, right? That's where you're desiring something different or something new. Then you head into the planning area, the planning part. And this part usually we can handle because nothing's changed yet. We're just thinking about it. We're finding clarity, even setting action steps, but we're not doing it yet. It's when we come to the action point, the next part of this cycle, that doubt starts to creep in. And that's where most of us hit this wall when we're trying to create change. So when we do those things, like we stop taking action or we self-sabotage, or we don't do what we said we were going to do, this just makes the doubt stronger. It makes you doubt yourself even more. And then, of course, what happens? You don't get the results that you wanted. So I put negative results there. You feel like you failed again. And basically, you've created this loop that is confirming those doubtful thoughts that you had. So that's where I put evidence. You see evidence that your doubts were right, that you can't trust yourself. And then those beliefs become reinforced. So then you have to go through this whole cycle again, because you basically got excited, got momentum, started to act, doubt comes in, you freeze, or you don't do what you say you were going to do, then you don't get the results. You take that as evidence that you can't do it. And you have to then get to the point again where you build yourself up and you're ready to try again. And this is hard. It's hard emotionally and it's hard mentally. So you can see on this little cycle where I've put an arrow of self-trust. And this is what people who trust themselves do, because you can't cross out the doubt out of this cycle. The doubt will still creep in. No one is immune to that. And that is just part of who we are as humans because of the way that our minds work to protect us. They are going to doubt anything new that you try. Your mind, is going to doubt anything that you want to do that's new or different because the results are unknown, and that's not safe. So historically, that's just something that we have built in to protect us. So you can't stop the doubt from showing up at that point. It will still be there. But here's the difference. Instead of getting swept up in that doubt and heading towards those sort of negative consequences because you either frozen or you self-sabotaged or done, not done what you said you were going to do. So instead of just heading down into that cycle again, people who trust themselves realize that this is happening. And they trust that despite the doubt, they can listen to their intuition and they can keep moving forward. So instead of going down into the cycle, they regroup and then take a baby step. And maybe they have to do this a few times, ongoing, stopping, noticing the doubt, regrouping, and then taking another baby step. So you can keep doing this, and that way you're still moving forward and you're not going back down into this cycle. But you have to recognize that doubt, and you have to recognize that doubt at that point in the cycle is normal, but you don't have to listen to it. So hopefully this is starting to make sense for you. And maybe you can see how this is played out in your own life. And if you can recognize yourself in this, then you might want to jot down some examples of where this cycle has shown up in your life. So if you have a pen and paper, feel free to take a few minutes and just think about, where has this cycle shown up for you? How has this cycle shown up in your life before? And feel free to just jot down any ideas that come to mind as I continue on. Let's go to the next slide here. So let's talk about why you don't trust yourself. There are, of course, lots of different reasons that you might not trust yourself. We're all complex beings, and you might have some specific reasons. But what I'm going to do is just group some of the most common reasons into 3 different categories. So hopefully you'll be able to relate to one or possibly even all 3. So the first one is past experiences have demonstrated a lack of trust. So this is what I was just talking about, that cycle. Having the desire to do something new, finding the clarity, building a plan, starting to implement that plan, then getting freaked out and allowing the doubt to control you so that you freeze or self-sabotage. And then seeing the results of that whole cycle as proof that you can't trust yourself. So if you've gone through this cycle over and over, especially in the same, like one area of your life, you can see that your mind has a lot of evidence, what it thinks is evidence that you can't be trusted. And it's going to remind you of this very strongly every time you try to make changes. So that's that first reason that you might not trust yourself. That because of past experiences, your mind feels like it has evidence that you can't trust yourself. The second point is that I put here stories that aren't ours. Now, there are other reasons that we don't trust ourselves in addition to what I've talked about. What I mean by this one is that it could be anything that you've been told about whether or not you should trust yourself. So this could be specific to you. So for example, you could have had a friend or a parent or a teacher, someone along the way who gave you the message or the impression that you shouldn't trust yourself. So that might have been out of a specific situation or circumstance, or it might have been through their actions and through their behavior that you picked that up. It could also be on a broader scale. So something that you've learned, from your community or your culture or just society in general. When you think about things like marketing messages, they are often great at reminding us that we can't trust ourselves. I even believe that, the fact that we have so many rules and laws in our world today, that contributes to feeling like we can't trust our own judgment. And we have to look outside of ourselves to be told what to do. So all of that as well, those external circumstances that we've, grown up in, create that feeling that we can't trust ourselves. And then the last point on here is no past experiences. So this is similar to the first point, but when we do something new or we attempt to do something we've never done before, it's just naturally harder to trust yourself because you have no evidence at all at that point. So your mind has nothing to compare this new experience with. So in other words, that cycle or that feedback loop that we talked about isn't there yet. So your mind is sitting in limbo. And this space is, it's a space of unknown. So naturally that feels scary to your mind, which is logical because your mind wants to protect you. So it's going to default to wanting you to go back to what's known and what's safe, even if what's known and safe doesn't feel good. So again, if you can think of some examples where this has shown up for you, feel free to just take a minute and jot those down. So which of these 3 reasons can you relate to most? So is it that you've been caught up in that cycle of not being able to trust yourself, where past experiences have shown your mind that you can't trust yourself? Is it that you feel like maybe you've grown up with a lot of different stories around self-trust that are affecting you? Or is it because you're attempting something really new or really different and there's nothing right now for your mind to grab onto in order to know whether you can or cannot trust yourself? So think about which one has affected you the most. And what kind of beliefs do you have about yourself when it comes to self-trust? And where did those beliefs come from? And feel free to just keep jotting down any ideas that come to mind as I continue. I'm just going to continue on to the next slide. Because of course, we don't want to stay in that place of not trusting. We want to develop self-trust for ourselves. Hopefully so far, everything we've talked about is making sense. And you're seeing why it's been so hard to trust yourself. And you might be thinking that it feels kind of like everything is stacked against you. And no wonder that you struggle with self-trust, right? So what can we do about it? And just like anything, it doesn't happen overnight, but you can take some small steps to build self-trust. And that cycle that I talked about can actually go the opposite way. So you can start giving yourself evidence and giving your mind evidence that you can trust yourself if you do that regroup and keep doing those baby steps. Then you can give your mind evidence that you can trust yourself and strengthen that instead of the other loop. So I've outlined 5 steps that you can take to foster self-trust. And I'm going to share a little bit about each one. And we're going to start working on them right here together. And then you can continue to practice this in your own life if this is something that you want to work on. So these are the 5 steps. The first one is to forgive and start fresh. The second one is to find positive past experiences. The third one is to keep promises to yourself. The fourth one is to practice self-love. And the 5th one is to get support. So like I said, I'm going to talk about each and explain these a little bit and how you can implement them in your own life. So let's start with the first one. Forgive and start fresh. Now this one is pretty self-explanatory, but I want to take a minute and actually do this with you. Because it's one thing to say it, of course, and it's another thing to do it. So I want to do a quick process together, a quick visualization exercise to help you with this step. So if you can, if you're in a position where you can close your eyes and just get comfortable for a second. So if you can do that, go ahead and close your eyes And you can put your hands over your heart if you want to. And just breathe in and out. Just letting yourself be present and relax. Taking just a few minutes for yourself. And as you're breathing, imagine a little spark in your heart. Just breathing in and out. And as you bring your attention to that little spark in your heart space, it starts to glow. And it starts to radiate a golden light. And as you focus on this little spark, it starts to glow brighter and brighter. And continue breathing in and out and bringing your attention to that spark and watching it continue to glow. And if your hands are over your heart, imagine feeling that spark, the light and the warmth coming through into your hands. And really connect with that space in your heart. That space where that spark lives is where your truth lives, and where your intuition lives, your inner wise self. And feel the compassion and the love that comes from this space. And now set the intention that you wish to strengthen your connection to your inner wise self. And you can repeat after me, or feel free to choose your own words and just repeat them in your mind. I invite my wise self to join me. I welcome her wisdom. I forgive myself for the times when I haven't listened, both in the past and in the future. And if you have some examples that have come to mind where you haven't listened to your wise self, you can imagine those going into your heart and beginning to dissolve. Dissolving any pain from those experiences. Dissolving any anger that you have towards someone else or yourself. And imagine that love and forgiveness spilling out from your heart and wrapping around those memories. I'm ready to start fresh. I'm ready to listen to my inner wisdom. I trust my wise self. I trust her guidance. I trust myself. And just repeat any other words or mantras to yourself that you would like to add. Keeping your hands on your heart. Holding that intention that today is a new day, a fresh start. And you can start fresh anytime that you need to. You can come back and do this again at any time. And now coming back to the present, just move around in your seat a little bit. Wake yourself up, wiggling your toes, opening your eyes. And feel free to do a short visualization like this anytime that you need a fresh start. And I'll be sending out the replay to this. So if you were in a place where you couldn't do the visualization, feel free to do that later when I send out the replay. But you can do those same steps of connecting to your intuition, to your inner wise self. And you can use this as a way to regroup. So like that cycle that we talked about, you can use this when you feel those doubts coming in to help you regroup so that you can continue taking those baby steps forward and find a little inspiration if you need it. So I'm going to move on to the next slide now. There we go. So the next step that I talked about was to find positive past experiences. So this one allows us to interrupt that feedback loop that we talked about with some positive evidence. So like I said, instead of using that cycle to reaffirm that we can't trust ourselves, we can start to use it to reaffirm that we can. We can start to fill our mind with positive experiences and times where we did trust ourselves instead of the ones that can lead to more self-doubt. So again, if you want to do this with me, grab your paper and pen and see if you can think of a time when you trusted yourself and took an action or followed through to create a positive result. So write down whatever comes to mind. It could be a time that you listened to your intuition and avoided a bad situation. It could be a time that you took a chance on something and it turned out well. So just write down anything that you can think of. And of course, if you're having trouble being put on the spot like this, you can just write down the question and come back to it later. So think of a time when you trusted yourself and took an action or followed through to create a positive result. And I would even suggest writing down multiple examples. If you can think of 10 times, that's even better. We want to give our minds as much evidence as we can. And then the second point on here is to pay attention to new positive experiences going forward and write them down. So as you continue to move forward, now knowing what you know about how self-trust works, then you can interrupt that cycle and you can start writing down the experiences that you have that will give you more positive results about how you are trusting yourself. So pay attention when you do follow through and you do take a step. You know, even if it's having a conversation with someone about, you know, your new boundaries, or if your action is drinking more water and you've done it 5 days in a row, like you said you would, write that down and celebrate all those things where you do follow through, all those times where you do follow through. And it's especially helpful to write it down because you can revisit that when self-doubt starts creeping in. And you can give yourself proof and evidence that you do follow through and you do, that you can trust yourself, even when it gets difficult. Now, the third step that I talked about was to keep promises to yourself. So there's a couple things that I want to talk about with this. I've separated this one out into some additional points. The first one I wrote is to write it down. It's important to keep promises to yourself because we want to build that trust with ourselves. So we've all heard that if you write down your goals, you're more likely to achieve them. Of course, this isn't the only step. It's only the first step. You're still going to have to do the work, but it's a great first step because it takes it from something in your head and makes it more real. It makes it more tangible. So you can write these down in your journal or a notebook or wherever you like to write your goals. But whatever you're choosing that you really want to focus on, that you really want to accomplish, write those steps down so that you can come back to them. Write down your decisions or your promises or your goals and commitments. And that way, you know, you're telling yourself that when you write it down, that means it's something that I really want to do and it's important to me. Step 2 is to make a commitment. So consider these things that you've written down, your promises or your decisions, to be commitments to yourself and give them the same importance as any other commitments in your life. You really have to make a conscious choice that this is high priority, highly important to you. And that's, one of the reasons that I shared in last month's webinar that you should only tackle a few actions at a time, because especially when they're habits or ongoing actions, because you want to be able to really commit to them. You don't want to take on more than you can handle, because then you will end up not being able to keep all of your promises, and then you're not going to feel good about that. Which is why I put as the next point, only make promises that you can keep. So along those same lines, you want to make sure that you actually know what you're promising yourself and know that you're capable of achieving it. So you might not know that you can achieve the result that you want, because that's not something that you can be able to tell yourself for sure. You don't know what results are going to come from your actions, but you want to know that you can do the action. That's the part that you can control. So make sure that whatever you're promising yourself is something that you can actually do, that you can find time for it, that you know how to do. So for example, if you promise yourself that from now on, you're going to stop yelling at your kids, ask yourself if you have a strategy for how to do that. Like, do you know how to actually stop yelling at your kids? Maybe you need to read a book and write down the steps that they suggest. Maybe you need to take a course or see a therapist for some strategies. So to say something, big like that, you're sort of setting yourself up for failure. So instead, break it down into what steps you actually know how to do. And if you don't know how to do them, then your step is to figure out what it is that you have to do. And focus on the steps that you're taking, the actions that you're taking, not on the results that you want, because only the steps you can control, the results you can't. Really break it down so that you can see what it'll actually take in real life. Then the fourth point on here is to start with baby steps. So again, like that example that I just talked about, you want to break it down. You don't want to start with something like, I'm not going to yell at my kids, because that involves a lot of different steps probably. So maybe your first step is that every time you feel like yelling, you're going to count to 10 in your head. So again, that might not work every time, but you can feel good that you're keeping that promise that you made about that first step. And if it doesn't work, you don't get the results you want, you can go back and choose a different step, but you haven't broken the promise to yourself of what you're going to do. Because we have to separate what we're doing from the results that we're getting in order to develop that trust in ourselves. And when you're ready, then you can move to another step. So again, with the baby steps, start with what you can do. When you do that, then you can move to the next step. A lot of times when we feel that we've failed, it's because we've bitten off more than we can chew. Or we've put these, really huge expectations on ourselves. So you definitely want to start with something that you know that you can do. And then the last point that I put on this one is to check in regularly. So like I mentioned in a previous step, start tracking your wins, even the little ones. Check in, once a day or once a week, whatever works for you, and see how you're feeling. And again, that idea of only picking a few things at a time, when we only choose a few things at a time to work towards or work on, then it's easier to check in like this. Because, for example, if our one thing that we're working on is drinking more water, it's easy to check in daily and see if we've actually done what we said we were going to do. But if we have 10 different things that we're working on, we're going to feel overwhelmed, and we're going to forget about some of them, and we're going to forget to check in because we've got too much going on. So keep it simple, make a commitment, only make promises you can keep, start with those baby steps, and check in regularly, and celebrate every time that you do follow through and every time that you do what you said you were going to do. And when you do that check-in, you can also check in to see if you need a little mini fresh start. Maybe you didn't do that well that day. So maybe you want to do that little visualization and just decide that you're going to start fresh again tomorrow. But really be present with the whole process. So if you did do last month's workshop with me, then go back to your priority action items and make sure that they pass the test of these 5 items here that are on the screen right now. Did you write them down? Did you make a commitment to yourself? Did you choose a baby step that you know that you can accomplish? And do you have a plan to check in regularly? So make sure that whatever actions you choose fit these 5 things on the screen so that you can keep that promise to yourself. Okay, and moving on to step 4, practicing self-love. So this is a big one. And I just wrote a blog post on this last week. So if you haven't read it, definitely head over to my blog after the webinar today and read through it. In the post, I talk about 5 other self-words that I believe make up self-love. And self-love is so important because it's what drives us to want to do better and be better and step into the person that we know we are on the inside. And it's also what gives us grace when we mess up. And it's what allows us to forgive ourselves when we feel like we've betrayed our own trust. It's what guides us and helps to keep us moving forward. So those 5 self-words that I talked about are self-acceptance, self-compassion, self-advocacy, self-appreciation, and self-care. Now, I won't spend a lot of time talking about each of these because for the most part, they're fairly self-explanatory. It's about putting it into practice, which, that's the hard part, of course, but it's just a good reminder to think about how you are incorporating these into your life right now and where you could start incorporating them a little bit more. So again, just jot down any ideas that might come to mind right now, around these 5 areas. How are you practicing self-love? How are you accepting yourself fully? How are you having compassion for yourself? How are you standing up for yourself? How are you appreciating yourself? And how are you caring for yourself? So which one do you find that you are really doing well at? Which one of these is the easiest for you? Write that down. And which one do you find the most difficult? And jot down some ideas around how you could incorporate this into your life more. What areas do you need to incorporate this into your life more? And like I said, feel free to head over to my blog if you haven't read that article, because I go into a little bit more detail around each one. And you might want to take some time to journal about what self-love looks like for you personally. And like I said, what areas are you doing really well when it comes to self-love? And what areas do you need to bring a little more love into? Because it's going to be different for each person. So let's move on to the final step of developing self-trust, which is to get support. And again, this is important because you don't have to do it alone. Although self-trust is a personal thing, right? It's about trusting ourselves. You can get help to do this. Yes, you have to start within, but it's perfectly okay to get support and to get help along the way. So I've put down a couple ideas for how you can get support. Of course, there's more than this. So you can think about what would make sense in your own personal life. But a therapist is always helpful, especially if you found that you had a lot of painful stories come up, or if you found that you've been stuck in that cycle of not trusting yourself for a long time. Then a therapist is great to talk about that and to go through some of those painful stories from your past, so that you can forgive whoever needs to be forgiven and really move on from that. A coach. So this is, where I can help you. And coaches tend to be more forward-looking than therapy. So the way that I could help with this is helping you figure out exactly what you want and creating that plan. So that first piece, but then supporting you as you move forward. And as you might be tempted to go down into that cycle that we talked about, a coach can help support you to keep moving forward and keep doing those baby steps. Coaches provide accountability and support, as I said, and sometimes you might have two different coaches at different stages of your life, because not all coaches do the same thing. So it's important to just find a coach that resonates with you right now for what it is that you need support with at this stage in your life. Friends can be really helpful. Friends can be helpful if you need to call and vent. When you're feeling like you're in that full-on doubt mode, you're feeling overwhelmed, a friend can be really great to talk to just to unload some of that, assuming that, of course, you do the same for your friend when they need it too. A friend can also be really great for accountability. So if you have a friend that's doing something similar to you, or you're both working towards different goals, then you guys can both work together and talk each other through those doubtful times, and also hold each other accountable. And then your family. So family can help support you not only in what you're working through, because sometimes our families don't understand in the way that we want them to, which is why all those other support ideas are out there. But your family can be great to turn to support you in giving the space that you need. So maybe helping out with other things, around the house, so that you can find some time to care for yourself, or so that you can find some time, to work on clarity or whatever it is that you need. So family isn't always the best to turn to help you with some of your specific issues, but more to help out in your environment, and create a more supportive environment for you. And then finally, something like a support group. So this could be within your community or online, whatever works for you. But again, a place where you can reach out, whether you need some feedback on an idea, or you need someone to listen, or you just need some emotional support. So think about, which of these would make sense, and probably you would want to have some support in more than one, because not everyone is going to be available all the time to support you. So you want to have a couple of different options there that you can turn to when you need support. The key here is that it's up to you to reach out and ask for support. Make it a priority for you. People aren't mind readers. They're depending on you to ask. And not in the heat of the moment when you feel like your world is caving in, if you can help it. Set up some support systems ahead of time. See if you can look ahead and see where you think you might need extra help. And set that up so that you can have success instead of waiting until you feel like everything is on your shoulders. So ask a friend if she can be, a support buddy for you, or hire a therapist or a coach. You know best what you need, but you have to make sure that you're reaching out and asking and not depending on other people to just come and help you. So again, jot down any ideas that you have. Who do you currently have in your life that's providing support for you? What areas are you lacking support? And who can you ask? Maybe within the next couple of days or the next couple of weeks, if they can be part of your support team. So just jot down any ideas that you might have around this. And the last thing that I want to talk about before I leave you today is what to do when you feel like you've messed up. Because as my first point here says, you will mess up. We all do. Just know that it's going to happen. If you feel, like you've betrayed your trust, or you feel like you didn't keep a promise to yourself, just know that that's going to happen, and that's okay. And it's just part of being human. You will have those doubtful thoughts. You will have critical thoughts towards yourself. That's normal, and it happens to all of us. And that's why I put point number 2, remember self-love and self-trust are a practice. It's not something that you just put on your list that you can just check off. Done. Love myself, done. Trust myself, done. It's a practice. And it's going to take some time. Each time you try something new or you move to a new level of your life, you will have to come back to that practice. And in the beginning, if this is not something that you're used to practicing, you're going to have to come back to this practice every single day. And that's okay. And it's normal. Give yourself grace. Give yourself a break when you feel like you've messed up. Show yourself compassion. Show yourself the same compassion that you would show any of your friends. Know that it's okay. Know that you can start fresh tomorrow. Use those tools that we've talked about today to get back on the wagon, because perfection is not the goal. Loving yourself where you're at right now is the goal. Loving yourself enough to forgive your mistakes. Loving yourself enough to want more for yourself, more alignment, more purpose, more joy, more happiness, more ease, more fulfillment. That's really why we do this work. And then the last point, leaning on your support network when you need to. So just like I talked about, when you feel like you've messed up, reach out. You don't have to do it alone. So before I go today, I do want to briefly share how we can continue working together if today's webinar resonated with you. And I'll keep this short because you can feel free to have a look at my website and see if coaching might be the right fit for you, if I might be the right fit for you. I have a 3-month coaching program called Into Alignment, and it's a one-on-one program, which means I will work with you privately to help you uncover your purpose, help you uncover who you really are and what you're meant to do so that you can begin to shift your life into alignment with your true purpose. And what makes coaching with me unique is that I combine coaching with Akashic record readings, because I find that the readings really help to give my clients clarity around their purpose, but also validation around some of the things that they've been thinking about or considering but maybe weren't sure about. So I use the readings to peer into who you are at soul level and help you understand that and how it applies to your purpose and to your life. And then together we take that information and just bring it into your life in a really practical way. So in this reading, you'll get in this program, you'll get 3 different readings, as well as a coaching call with me twice a month for 3 months. So if this sounds like something you'd like to explore or learn more about, definitely visit my website at michellekirsch.com and click on Work With Me to learn more about the program. Or feel free to reach out by email with any questions as well. We can also jump on a quick call to get to know each other, and I can answer any questions that way too. So just reach out if you'd like to set up a call, or if you have any questions. I would love to get to know you better and hopefully support you through coaching. So that is it. That's today's webinar on self-trust. I want to thank you again for joining me today. I always enjoy sharing this kind of content, and I hope that you had some great ahas and insights. And if you did, I would love to hear about that as well. So definitely reach out either by email, or you can pop into the Nourish and Shine Facebook group as well. I would love to hear from you. So thank you again, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.